Welcome everyone. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about building a resilient mindset, especially in relation to the workforce and how we can develop it in ourselves and also in our teams. And for our audience today, we're going to hear from experts who are going to give us some really great tips and tools and takeaways that we can actually use from day one after today's session. So firstly, I'm just going to introduce myself as your moderator and then move over to our fantastic panel. So my name is Solveig Biddle. As you can hear, I'm from the UK. I'm a lawyer and an entrepreneur, and many years ago, I took a leap into the unknown to set up a business, and I had to learn to have a resilient mindset. And I wish I'd been able to tune into the panel that we have today. So over to the panel. Welcome, panelists. Thank you so much for being here today. It'd be great if each of you could introduce yourselves. Firstly, starting with Keenan.
Hey,
Hi,
how are
Keenan.
you? Thank you for having me. Keenan Beasley here, serial entrepreneur. I think my career has been built off of transitions, right, and being resilient. So coming from West Point into the corporate sector at Procter & Gamble, Reckitt Benckiser, L'Oreal, but then going off starting my own ad agency, a nonprofit, and then several other companies in the CPG space. Just really excited to be here with all the panelists and share with you guys.
That's fantastic. Is there anything Keenan hasn't done? That's absolutely brilliant. And now over to you, Dave.
Hi, Solveig. Thank you. Somewhat similar background to Keenan. I graduated from West Point, spent 10 years in the Army as a Green Beret, transitioned, got my MBA from Duke, and went into the technology space where I held various sales and operations leadership roles. And I transitioned again last year to start Brahmasano Partners, my own life and executive coaching business. Very excited to talk about resiliency.
That's absolutely fantastic. Such brilliant experience. And Rob.
Hi, how you doing? Thanks for having me. Appreciate it. So yeah, Rob Stevenson here, currently a member of the executive team here at the Florida Panthers, overseeing our facilities and human resources. Graduated from Amherst College in 2008, went through Officer Candidate School, through SEAL training, did a couple deployments with SEAL Team 2, transitioned to the reserves and started a career in finance. And that kind of led me to find my groove within the HR space in finance. And I came here most recently from Point 72 Asset Management in New York.
That's fantastic. Gosh, I can see resilience has certainly been part of your life too. And Candy, tell us about you.
Hi, I'm Candy Angora, Chief Transformation and People Officer for Goodway Group. I've been here about 5 years. I've been on my personal journey and professional journey for the past 25 years. I started at Coca-Cola, where my job was literally to teach people how to read at a 9th grade level so they could read the procedures and policies back in the days of ISO. And it's transitioned all the way to where I am today. I'm a non-traditional HR person. I love people, and so that's really what it's about. And although I didn't attain my formal education from West Point, I did have the privilege of attending a leadership development program at West Point in 2016, which was focused on battle-led leadership strategies. So we were put in, or we were given a mission where we literally had to learn how to lead in high stress, and it was really amazing. So I'm excited to be here.
Candy, that's fantastic. I can really see a similar thread with all of you today, which I think is really exciting given what we're going to be talking about, particularly with the background of the epidemic that we've had and the challenges that people are facing to sort of get back to normality. So thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. I thought just before we start our discussion that it would be quite useful just to set out a couple of ideas of what we mean by resilience, and then we can pick up those threads. So one understanding is it's the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties. And I think that's one that we can all really understand. And the American Psychological Association, they defined resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or even significant sources of stress. And I think that some of the military conversations might come into that. Those are two interesting definitions, I think, of resilience. So I'm going to go over to all of you, because this is what it's about. You're the ones with the experience and we need to learn from you. So it would be great if each of you in turn can explain to our audience What in your background has made you resilient? And what does resilience mean to you? And I'm going to start with Candy.
Sure. So I actually have two things that come to mind. Obviously, there's plenty in my life, but there's two that really stand out that really have helped me develop my skill of resilience. The first one was when my 12-year-old son, at the time, he was 12, he's now 28, was diagnosed with epilepsy. Up until that time, he had no health issues. It literally started one morning while he was getting ready for school when he dropped to the floor in a seizure. It impacted our whole family, including his younger brother, who's 4 years younger. It took us 4 years to stabilize the seizures and another 2 to find his new normal, which included 16 pills a day to control his seizures and the side effects of the seizure medication. So that was a challenge. The second one was 5.5 years ago when I found my birth mother. I was adopted when I was 6 years old. When speaking to her for the first time, she shared her health history, and she had been diagnosed with breast cancer twice. And so that was a Sunday. That Monday, I went in and got a mammogram. And that following Friday, I was diagnosed with triple negative stage 2 breast cancer, which is a very fast growing and aggressive breast cancer. So after 8 months of treatment and rebuilding myself, I'm thriving in my new normal. And so both of those experiences have really given me the opportunity to, improve my skills around resilience. And I really believe that resilience is a skill and it can be learned, but the key part of it is how do you use those skills to help you grow and thrive through the challenge. And that's really, really key to me.
Absolutely. And Candy, it's so great to see a smile on your face after those 2 major life experiences. And I'm sure that you really help people going forward, having had those experiences yourself. So thank you very much for sharing those with us. Keenan.
Yeah.
Please tell us about what in your background has made you resilient.
I had an answer, Candy, but Candy is going to make me dig a little deeper here. So I appreciate you leveling up the panel here. For me, I think if I really pinpoint some of the times where I had to really dig deep, it was the first time that I felt like I failed. And honestly, the first time I felt like I failed was coming out of West Point. Unlike Dave and doing some cool stuff that Rob got to do in the SEALs, my career was cut short. So I was a medical discharge coming out of school. And most of us, you go to the academy because you expect to serve and you know what your career is going to be. And I all of a sudden in April, a month before graduation, was told that I'm not going to do that. And I just felt like a tremendous failure to just my family and my classmates, that I just let a lot of people down. And I think what happened there is it sharpened my mind. What it made me look at was everything, every piece of adversity, every situation as an opportunity to learn, to grow, to really redefine myself and following what God has in purpose for me. And I think that was a very big moment and a catalyst for me that shaped my career. Well, now I don't even feel like I'm being resilient. I'm actually feeling extremely grateful. So everything that happens to me at this point now, I just see it as an opportunity to get better, to learn and to really grow into who I'm supposed to be.
Keenan, that's so interesting. And I think often out of disappointment, you really do sometimes have to find huge resilience to move forward. So I think that's incredibly useful for our panel today. And Dave, tell us about you.
Sure. So I think what resilience means to me is having a generally positive outlook that things are going to be okay. And by that, I don't mean a rosy, I'm going to get everything that I want out of life, or, I'm going to attain 100% of my goals, but that you are centered in yourself and you know that if you keep on trying for the things that you want to get at, life is generally going to come out more in your favor than not. Somewhat similar to Keenan, I think that something in my background that helped me build resiliency was that I was given the opportunity and I sought out the opportunity at various levels to fail. And if you think about the West Point experience, you started at a very early age, probably younger than you should be. You're leading one person, then you're leading 5 people, then you're leading 30 people, then you're possibly leading a whole brigade's worth of people. I know 22-year-olds who are in charge of 1,000 people, and it's a low stakes environment such that you can really test and assess yourself and understand where your gaps are. And something that I'd like to talk about later on is developing that internal dialogue and really being objective in your self-assessment so that you can understand where you're at in that journey.
Absolutely. And of course, being surrounded by so many people, you're also seeing how they adapt to being resilient. And we can all learn from everybody every day, can't we? So that's fantastic. Thank you very much, Dave. And over to you, Rob.
Yeah, so I think, it's a life of, we all have our core. We all have our core of who we are and who our tight kind of circle of support is. But then the rest, the outside of it, feels like it's going to constantly test you, constantly not believe in you. And so I think I've just had a slew of those, whether it be playing hockey growing up as a kid, trying to make it to the college ranks, having this goal of joining the teams when I was like 13 and just kind of building a life around it, and having several people constantly remind me that I'm a terrible runner. And yet, like, you just kind of push through it. And for me, like, what resilience is, I think on the surface, it's an ability to kind of thrive and overcome when things get hard. But at the core, what it really is for me is it's all about alignment, right? It's about alignment of your passions. And if you don't have that, you're not going to have the ability to be resilient when the time comes.
Now, over to all of you. And I'm going to start with Candy. How do you develop resilience for yourself and your team?
Sure. So I think for me, it starts with a foundation of wellness and like a holistic wellness. So really focusing in, on physical, emotional, community, my career. And I know when I'm taking care of myself, and that's almost like being proactive by doing those things, because then when something hits, my body's in a good shape, my mind's in a better shape. And so that kind of helps me prepare for what's next. Like, for example, before I was diagnosed with breast cancer, I was actually in the best shape of my life. I was weightlifting, I was very physically active, and my body was prepared for what was to come. Mentally, I've been through some other things, and I was prepared, and I had some strategies to use, and I built on them because obviously, as I continued to grow through that journey, I needed more things. But being prepared and really focusing on yourself, even self-awareness, and realize, where are you at right now, and how do you react to emotions? How are you living your life? Are you really grounded in your purpose, or are you just a co-pilot to your life, and you're just going throughout your day letting things happen to you? And so really spend the time while nothing's happening to really focus on those type of things has really helped me. For my team and the teams within our organizations, we really focus in on this, and we create a practice and a framework. So we have team health monitors for our teams, and there's a series of questions that they ask themselves quarterly as a team, and they can actually bring it up at any time, but quarterly it's a practice. And it really talks about the things like, do you have the trust? Or are y'all grounded in the mission and the purpose of your team? What behaviors are important to your team? And some of those questions outside of the normal business things. And then based on how they score themselves, they have a book of plays. I say a book, it's online, but they have different plays that will help them through things and teach them to get better. And so when there's a time of crisis, they can quickly talk about, where are we? And then, is there a play to get us through this? An example would be during COVID when, kids were coming home. We have a large amount of women working for us, and, we've been fully remote for a long time, but they had to work, and they had their children, they were trying to teach school. So we created really quickly a flexibility play that helped them have the conversations at the team level to decide what they needed to do to support each other and their clients. So, we do trainings and we have wellness programs, but we also try to create practices and frameworks that help them create those habits and things to go to when a crisis hits.
That's very, very practical, and I can see that would be something very useful going forward. Rob, I'd be interested to hear for you, and with your team, since you work with lots of teams, and to hear about how you develop resilience for yourself and your teams.
Yeah, I think it's all about two things really, I think, is system design and org design. If you get those two things right, you're going to be part of something that enables resilience within yourself, and you're going to enable a resilient team. System design, BUDS and SQTs, the pipeline to make it to the SEAL teams has been in effect for, call it 50 years, right? It's designed to push people past the point that they think they are capable of, right? And we've had a number of people talk about failures and how important that is to building resiliency. Resilience is a muscle group, right? And if you're not training that muscle group, you're not going to make it stronger. So you need to provide those opportunities for your people as leaders to push them past what they think they're capable of. And if they hit a wall, because everybody hits a wall, you have to be there to provide that support, right? It's like the walls of a building, right? You're not just going to make them out of concrete blocks. You're going to reinforce those concrete blocks with rebar. And as leaders of an organization, we're the rebar, right? We provide that inner strength to help them withstand what they're facing. That, to me, those are the biggest things.
No, that's really interesting. Thank you so much. And Keenan, what about you, particularly for yourself? What do you do to build resilience in yourself and your teams?
I think it's where I choose to spend my time and where do I focus my energy, right? I'm going to come back to part of my last answer. Again, when we think about adversity, right, and just some of these things that are tough, right, that happen in our lives, I always remind myself that my problems are never more abundant than my blessings. And it's a very simple philosophy for me. And so I wake up and I give thanks, right? I take a moment in the middle of the day, right? Some people meditate, right, and do these things. But I choose to focus on all the positive things at very specific moments in the day when things start to get a little tough, right? Because we all deal with challenging times throughout the day. I tell everyone, like, I used to be able to control my mornings, but now I have a 4-month-old, so now I can't even control those. I'm just like in a constant state of chaos now. But I really just try to train my mind to focus on those blessings, and I pray for alignment, right? That's a big thing for me, in that I can just stay in the rhythm, right? There's no such thing as work-life balance, right? There's no such thing as a predictable day, but I try to stay in the rhythm, in the flow, and I'm very conscious when I feel like I'm off. When I start to have some of that doubt creep in, right, I come back to my core and strengthen my mind by thinking on my blessings. And that's been just my philosophy for really the last 20 years.
Thank you, Keenan. I think that's also a really good tip and takeaway, actually, that we'll be just rounding up on when we finish our discussion. And Dave, what about you? What do you do to develop your resilience in yourself and your teams?
Sure. So the first thing I wanted to touch on, part of Rob's answer, I think the book Atomic Habits by James Clear has some wonderful tips for when you talk about systems thinking, building systems into your own life so that when willpower fades, when you're having the Keenan morning with the 4-month-old, I've been there, you can sort of fall back on the system. So it's not a willpower issue. I think there are two very important things for me when it comes to resilience. First is you have to test yourself. You don't know how resilient you are if you haven't actually taken whatever the test is and either failed or improved or whatever the case may be. So if you want to be a better public speaker and you're not in Toastmasters or you're not taking part in your boss's QBR or whatever the case may be, you have to put yourself through some sort of test in whatever field of endeavor you're in. The next thing is you need to start with yourself and you need to learn how to control your emotions. What I do personally, I've established a meditation practice. I encourage everyone to do that in whatever form is fitting for them, whether it's prayer or walking or exercise. But like Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor talks about, emotions are pretty much over from a physiological perspective in 90 seconds. So if you are angry after 91st second, then you are choosing to be angry. So what meditation does for me is it allows me to stop and give myself that clarity of what is actually going on so that I can take a more accurate and effective next step in whatever problem that I'm facing.
No, that's absolutely great. Often just taking that minute just to assess where you are. Great. And Candy, specifically over to you on this question. And I know you have gone into some detail in your last answer, but what are some science-backed strategies that you would recommend?
Yes, and I think we've heard a few of those here already. And so I'll kind of build on just actually what Dave was saying and Keenan a little bit. But, one of the things is really increasing your psychological flexibility. And one way to do that is through mindfulness meditation. And that's really when you're practicing and allowing your mind to be conscious in the present moment. And that helps you increase your awareness of your emotions. And there's different ones, as they've mentioned, different ways you can do that. And one way that's really worked for me, like especially when I was going through treatment, and sometimes it's not pleasant, right? There's pain involved. Is really going through a body scan and really checking with like literally from your head to your toe, like every part of your body, and releasing the tension that's in there, like really being aware of what you're feeling and what's there and releasing that. And that's one way. And there's so many different ways out there to practice mindfulness. Another one goes back to really being clear on what matters to you. I can hear that in everyone here. Everybody's really grounded in their purpose and having that clarity. And Keenan, you talked about when you're out of alignment, and the fact that that you're out of alignment knows that you're very grounded in that. And I think that's also something that's been talked about that really is greater than ourselves, and it's greater than the purpose of your organization, although you should understand how your purpose aligns with that. And then another one is really practicing action-oriented thinking. So like if you get to that 91st second, like Dave was talking about, and you're still there, how do you flip that to go, okay, what can I control? What's happening here? Really naming the emotion that you're feeling, but not making it part of you. Don't say, I am mad. I feel mad, right? It doesn't define you. You're just having a feeling in the moment. So name that emotion, lean into it, acknowledge it. So many times we try to just have grit to the point that we're just ignoring it, but really lean into it and then determine, what can I control? What resources do I need? What action can I take to go forward? Even if it's just a minimal viable step, just one thing to get me to this 92nd second, right? And move forward. And that puts you back in control, right?
That's great. And I think, again, there are lots of practical things there that people can think about. And that's very useful. I wanted to go on to Keenan. Just could we talk about negativity bias? What's the real danger of negativity bias?
Distraction. I think, said simply, if you focus in on the negatives, it'll completely throw you off of the mission of what you're trying to achieve. And I really believe in, I forget exactly who wrote the book. It'll come to me, Keller and someone else, but it's called The One Thing. And it's just the ability to focus in on what's the most important task. And I think when you have that negative bias, right, that doubt, starting to creep in your brain, it can completely veer you off of the task at hand, right? And it creates these distractions and these things to focus on that you don't need to, right? Yeah. Those insecurities, those doubts, we all have them, right? It's very, very human. We wake up with them, we'll go to sleep with them, but those things usually don't matter. And they're not going to stop us from really achieving the main thing. In business, sometimes we say, sales solve everything. It's a simple philosophy, but in a lot of ways it does, right? There's so many problems within the business and things you want to fix throughout the day. But guess what? If you sell more products, you're probably going to be okay, right? And that's something as an entrepreneur, it is sell one more product every day. That's my job. And so that's my one thing. And I try to remove that negative bias, right? All those other things that are distractions for me.
And I guess when you're removing that negative bias, what you're actually doing is increasing your positivity, which then from that, so much can be done. That's something I think that we can get from what you're saying there, Keenan, which is great. And Dave, I want to know what you think about, are we born with resilience? Is this something that some people have? And do you think that if you are born or if you aren't born, are there small changes that you can make that yield big results?
Certainly. There's an interesting book I just read called The Way We Work Isn't Working. And in that book, they talk a lot about how talent almost doesn't matter. Of course it does if you're talking about being, Wayne Gretzky or something like that. But it is the idea of putting in the time and putting in the effort at whatever it is that you're trying to get better at. So from that perspective, I think that there are people who have maybe a higher capacity to be resilient than others, but I definitely think that anyone can build tremendously upon their resilience. One thing that you talked about in terms of how we can build it, we talked about meditation and getting in control of your emotions. One of the things that I would like to get back to your question on Keenan, my grandmother always used to say, dime con quien andas, which means tell me who you run with and I'll tell you who you are. So we talk about negativity bias, the people that you surround yourself with, that's where you're setting the bar. So if you're in the lunchroom or you're in the water cooler chat room and everyone's complaining and everyone's talking about how the business is doing the wrong thing or taking the wrong next step, you need to get yourself away from that. You need to put yourself around the people who are trying to do better, trying to be better, and just trying to win. Those are a couple of things that I think you can do.
Yeah, Dave, that's so interesting because, of course, again, it's about removing that negativity
For
and
certain.
allowing yourself to be in that positive mindset. And
Absolutely.
Rob, I'd really like to ask you about some examples of resilience that you've seen in your teams or anywhere, in your life experience, because I feel that there are definitely some interesting examples there.
Yeah. I think going through training, you see resilience on a 24/7 basis, right? Whether it's somebody completing a 4-mile time run at 5 a.m. with a broken leg, somebody getting hypothermia in the cold water, warming up and going back in, responding the right way in battle, to kind of like private sector here. Look, like the past 18 months has been, it's been hard for everyone. And especially in the sports world, when leagues shut down, people didn't know if they were going to be able to provide for themselves and their families, right? Like that's the stress of that is, you can't really quantify it. And so that's something that we went through as an organization, and our ownership was one of very few to keep everybody employed, right? NHL stopped, didn't matter. Take care of the people. So, I mean, it's countless, how often we've seen it in the military and then also here at the Florida Panthers.
Thank you, Rob. Yes, and I think when we first started talking, just referencing the pandemic, it's heightened so many things that were already a challenge for people. And then when it comes down to your livelihood and not actually being able to work and to earn money, it makes it all the worse. So thank you for sharing that with us, Rob. I wish we had so much more time. And I think we can agree that we've had a really insightful and interesting conversation here. There is so much to be learned about building a resilient mindset and things that you can do for yourself and also your teams. And if you've built yourself up as being resilient, how much that can rub off on other people. What I'd like to do finally is to ask each of you if you can give me one takeaway, one tip, one tool, even if you've mentioned it already, that you would say would be something that somebody who watches this in our audience and who thinks I'm going to take away that opportunity and to make myself just that bit more resilient. So I'm going to start with you, Dave.
So the one thing that I would say is change the narrative in your mind. And similar to a relationship, you don't get commitment from a relationship by waiting for commitment. You get commitment in the relationship by showing commitment, and then it gets reciprocated. So change the narrative in your mind. Start by saying, I am a resilient person. I am capable of doing this, and you'll be amazed at where you get.
Thank you so much. And Candy?
Yes, I would say practice self-compassion, because when something happens, like give yourself a little grace. Remember, you're not alone. It is difficult, Be kind to yourself. And if you really struggle with that, because I know I have an inner critic and that's a battle every day, ask yourself, how would you treat a friend or someone that you love? Just start there. And whatever the answer is, then move forward with that for yourself.
Thank you, Candy. And Keenan, your number one takeaway.
It's a big question. I think what I would say is keep the main thing, right? So it's really focus in on what is the most important thing in your life and put your energy and your focus there so that you can block out the noise. And I truly believe when you take care of the main thing, everything else falls in place.
Thank you, Keenan. And Rob.
Yeah, I think I know it's one main takeaway, but it's three parts, right? Number one, I think it's vital everybody understands they are capable of building resilience. Period. Number two, how you do that, piggybacking off what Keenan just said, you got to align your passions with what you're doing. You will not be resilient in something that you don't care about. Number three, realize that nobody is above burnout. Nobody. Right? So realizing when that's happening and relying on that core group, that support structure that you have, so important.
That's absolutely fantastic. So I think if I would recap that, we've got self-compassion, determination, stick with the real thing that you want to be doing. Remember, it can be done. Align with your passion and be aware that everybody has a ceiling. Thank you so much for your time. And I know our audience are going to have lots of questions, so I think we can all look forward to engaging with them. Thank you so much today.
Thank you so much.